What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Fantasy Addiction Network. In this video, we are continuing my favorite series of the year. We're doing our must draft running backs in our My Guys series, and this is arguably the hardest position to get right. And obviously, we want to hit on as many of these as we can. So let's break it down for you guys. We'll begin again by doing a year in review and taking a look back at the past 2 years, some of the guys we've touted, if we've been successful or not, just to give you a bit of history. So last year we were touting Chris Carson, Leonard Fournette, Austin Eckler, Miles Sanders, and Duke Johnson. Chris Carson coming in at RB14 and ADP finished just above that. We'll give it a hit just because he didn't bust. Wasn't a massive jump up, but he did exactly what you were hoping for him to do, especially over the second half of the season until he got hurt. Leonard Fournette, really good performance there, finishing 7th overall, 9th in points per game after being drafted as the RB12. Austin Eckler was our biggest tout, RB30, finishing with points per game of number 6. Miles Sanders finishing the year much better, but still finished on average 22 fantasy points per, or 22nd in fantasy points per game above his 29th ADP. Our only real miss was Duke Johnson. We were hoping that he would see more of a starter role, but he got relegated behind Carlos Hyde, finishing as only 9.6 fantasy points per game, number 41, after being drafted as RB26. So pretty good hit rate last year. 2018, not as good of a year. We had Leonard Fournette get hurt immediately, still finished with 15 fantasy points per game, which was 12th at the position, but missing a good portion of the season. We'll call that one a push just because we can't exactly predict injury. Christian McCaffrey was a massive hit, taking him much earlier than RB10, finished as number 3 in fantasy points per game that year. Royce Freeman was a massive miss. That one was just, bad all around. Saquon Barkley, another massive hit, finished with the same amount of points per game as Christian McCaffrey. And Marshawn Lynch, we'll call it a push because he missed a good portion of the season. He was on pace to finish basically as Chris Carson did in 2019, just above his ADP. So likely would have been a hit had he played the full season, but we'll call it a push because can't predict injury. So pretty good year in 2019, decent year in 2018, going to do our best to try to hit as much as we can in 2020. So getting into that, if you have followed me at all, you should already know that my number one pick this year for my guys, my absolute favorite my guy of the season, is Mr. Miles Sanders, running back for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, again, same thing as our other My Guys videos. We're not going to go into the full story here. I'll link in the description box for you guys if you want to go to our player breakdown videos where we actually go through why we feel the way that we do about every player, where we have them projected. So give you some more context if you want to check those out. We're going to try to keep these short so we can get through all of them without making this video too long. But Miles Sanders, couple quick notes of why we love him so much this year. So looking back over the course of history, rookie running backs, the only running backs to record 725 rushing yards and 500 receiving yards in their rookie year were Miles Sanders, Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara, Edgerrin James, Marshall Faulk, Herschel Walker, Billy Sims, and Gale Sayers. So that's only 8 running backs, all of which are held in very high esteem. If you make that requirement go up to 800 rushing yards and 500 receiving yards, there's literally only 2 running backs that have done that, Saquon Barkley and Miles Sanders. So while a lot of people kind of forgot that Miles Sanders' rookie year was that dominant, was because he did the majority of that work over the second half of the season once Jordan Howard was hurt. Also, since 1992, there have been 61 running backs who have gotten 200 carries and 80 targets. And on average, they average 336 fantasy points over the course of the season. That would be a top 3 fantasy running back based on the last couple years of fantasy scoring. 42 of those 61 broke 300 points. Last year, Miles Sanders hit 63 targets, but over the back half of the season after Howard's injury, Sanders was averaging over 5 targets per game. He would need to hit that 5 target per game mark to hit that 80 targets. And he also averaged a 70% snap share after Jordan Howard's injury. We've survived free agency. We've survived the draft. We've survived the post-free agency period. They haven't signed another running back. Right now, they have Boston Scott, who is going to get some work. He's going to play that Darren Sproles role, but he's not going to be on the field 40% of the time. And Corey Clement, who was there last year and barely got any work. So unless something changes magically and they make a trade for a guy like Kareem Hunt, Miles Sanders is going to be the lead back. Doug Peterson has said as much multiple times this offseason. We've heard the constant drumbeat throughout the offseason has been that Miles Sanders is going to be the workload for this team. And if you want to ignore that because Doug Peterson has never had a running back that they've given significant carries to, even though they've never actually had a running back that they've spent significant draft capital on, they've never had a running back of the talent of Miles Sanders. If you want to ignore all that, fine. I'm not going to. Miles Sanders, to me, is the clear running back. Once you get past the elite four guys, you've got Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott, and Alvin Kamara. Once those guys are gone, I want Miles Sanders over everybody else. So, again, don't want to hit this point too much. We got to get on to the next guy. So our second guy is Nick Chubb. Now, I do want to make one point real quick. When it comes to guys that I've projected in the past, typically guys that I've taken a little bit longer to jump on board to, I don't have quite as a success rate with, but there's a little bit of a caveat. I was very high on Nick Chubb pretty much through May and June, and right around that time I started jumping more on board that the Kareem Hunt was going to be the better value train, and I've come back. So I think this is more of a reprise of my original feelings rather than changing my mind at the last second. So I think we're still pretty confident in Nick Chubb. I think he's going to have a very similar season to what Dalvin Cook did last year, and here's my reason why. First of all, obviously Kevin Stefanski coming over and trying to implement a similar scheme. We have Baker Mayfield, while not as accurate as Kirk Cousins, last year was his worst year by far in terms of his collegiate and professional career. Their offensive line was terrible last year. They go out and acquire Jack Conklin and take an offensive lineman in the first round of the NFL draft. So their offensive line is going to be much improved this year. Odell Beckham was hurt a lot last year. That's going to help their offense a good bit. They go out and acquire Austin Hooper. So this is going to be a really good offense. Defense is not going to be as good as the Vikings was last year, so that could put a little bit of a rail in there. And obviously, Kareem Hunt being there definitely limits his upside in the passing game, but this is a completely different coaching staff than we saw last year. So to try to project the targets share that Kareem Hunt was getting last year and say that Nick Chubb is not going to be involved in the passing game because of what Freddie Kitchens did doesn't make any sense to me. So I am very in on Nick Chubb. Last year, he had over 1,700 scrimmage yards, even in a Freddie Kitchens-led offense. He hasn't missed a game due to injury in his pro career. He was number 5 in weighted opportunities last year, which was one of the highest predictive metrics in terms of predicting future fantasy points. And he was number 1 in breakaway runs and number 2 in evaded tackles. This guy is a beast. If it wasn't for the fact that he came in the same draft class as Saquon Barkley, he would have been noted as one of the highest talent profiles of the last half a decade. Definitely up there in terms of athletic talent, and he's shown it thus far, but he's not getting the respect he deserves. So and then we have to recognize that there's a high chance that Kareem Hunt does not finish the season as a Brown. They're probably not going to pay him what he's worth. His contract is coming up next year, while Nick Chubb has 2 more years on his rookie deal. And if the Browns are smart, they're going to end up trading Kareem Hunt while they still have the ability to get something out of him rather than just letting him become a free agent and letting him walk for free. So there's a very high likelihood that Kareem Hunt gets traded to another team in need of a running back before the season is over. And if Nick Chubb is the only main running back on this team with an improved offensive line, an improved offensive system, Nick Chubb could very well be a top 5 running back this year, and you can typically get him in the second round. So as it stands right now, my favorite draft strategy is to take Miles Sanders and then a guy like Nick Chubb in the second round. Start off with 2 awesome running backs in your first couple of rounds, and then you can start going target wide receivers later. But anyway, so that's enough for Nick Chubb. Let's move on. So the next guy I want to talk about is the rookie Jonathan Taylor, rookie running back for the Indianapolis Colts. So I want to start off by saying, of all my guys, Jonathan Taylor is probably going to be the guy that I end up drafting the least because he is still seeing a very high ADP, even though there's been enough drumbeat to try to keep people off of him. And probably not going to end up with him as much as I would like, just because it's really hard to invest a 4th round pick on a guy that is probably not going to do as well as September as he will do in October, November, and December. That being said, if I don't draft Jonathan Taylor, pretty much from week 2 on, I'm going to be trying to get him in a trade every single week, because when he breaks out, Jonathan Taylor will be an elite running back 1 every single week of the year. Colts have the number 1 graded offensive line in the entire NFL. Last year, they had 399 rush attempts. Philip Rivers has averaged 130 targets to running backs in the past 3 years. And Jonathan Taylor had a 10.3% college target share, which is 76th percentile. Very good pass catcher, had more receiving work in Wisconsin than Melvin Gordon did, who also played with Philip Rivers, who was also very heavily involved in the passing game. Jonathan Taylor's a better runner and a receiver than Melvin Gordon. He had 26 touchdowns in his junior year and 3 straight 2,000 yards from scrimmage years in college. Absolute dominant producer, a 99th percentile speed score. Like, Jonathan Taylor is an absolute beast. He is the best prospect that we've seen since Saquon Barkley, and unless he suffers a massive injury, is virtually guaranteed to break out. The question is not if, it is when. So, and that is obviously a really big question when you're talking about redraft leagues. In Dynasty, it's not even a question, but in redraft leagues, it makes sense to question where you need to take him, because Marlon Mack is still there. The current drumbeat is that Marlon Mack will be the number 1 running back for a bit, and then they'll use the hot hand, which, I mean, Jonathan Taylor is going to have plenty of hot hand moments considering his athletic ability on the field. I don't know how long it takes for Jonathan Taylor to completely take over this backfield, but I wouldn't want to wait too long. So if you don't draft him, make sure he's a heavy trade target for you, because Jonathan Taylor is going to be on a lot of Super Bowl winning teams at the end of the year. All right, next, another rookie, DeAndre Swift, someone that you can get a couple rounds later. Part of the reason why I like him for that reason. Not as athletic as Jonathan Taylor, but was arguably a better NFL prospect because of his work in the receiving game. Very gifted pass catcher, arguably the best pass catcher in the class. You can make a case for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but DeAndre Swift was most certainly up there. A lot of people had DeAndre Swift mocked to go to the Kansas City Chiefs, and going to the Lions was a bit of a downgrade for him. But one thing to note, Kerryon Johnson, for one, throughout the whole offseason, hasn't really seemed to take any steps to want to say, like, no, this is my job, I'm going to fight for it. He even basically admitted on Twitter that, yeah, I'm going to, play more of a backup role with DeAndre Swift coming into town. And he's currently in a knee brace. So for what it's worth, a guy that hasn't been healthy his entire career is already hurt. DeAndre Swift, they could be walking into a very high snap percentage in Detroit. Now, while Detroit isn't the best offense in the world, Matthew Stafford was on a pretty good tear last year. If you want to think back a while ago, Reggie Bush had a 1,000-yard, 80-target season with Matt Stafford back in 2013. If you remember Theo Riddick had a few years as a pretty good PPR running back, even without getting a lot of carries. DeAndre Swift is a really good runner as well. He's not just a pass catcher. 80th percentile speed score and a 10.1% college target share, 75th percentile there. DeAndre Swift is going to eat this year, and you can get him typically in the 5th, sometimes even 6th round, depending on your league. Getting him as my RB3, if I go 2 wide receivers in the first 4 picks, is an absolute good idea. I don't really know how else to put that. I'm going to have DeAndre Swift in a lot of best ball leagues and on a lot of my redraft teams. Absolutely love DeAndre Swift. Okay, this last one, I have to preface this and say, this is my glutton for punishment pick. And this reminds me of a few years ago, I had picked Virginia to win in my March Madness bracket. I predicted them to win the national championship, and then they got eliminated in the first round. And then the next year when I did my March Madness bracket again, I put Virginia to win again. So glutton for punishment, but hopefully second time is better than the first with Duke Johnson. So Duke Johnson coming into last year with the Texans, we were really hoping that he would end up getting the majority of the workload. About a week before the season starts, they go out and acquire Carlos Hyde, and then Carlos Hyde ends up getting the majority of the carries, which absolutely sucks because Duke Johnson was a really good running back last year. He averaged number 2 in yards per touch. He was number 1 in 2018. He was 4th in breakaway run rate, and 9th in yards per carry. The guy has never missed a game due to injury. He's been efficient on pretty much any position that they've asked him to play, but he keeps getting thrown behind coaches that do not respect his talent. And unfortunately, Bill O'Brien is still there. However, David Johnson and Carlos Hyde are a different story. David Johnson, obviously they're paying him a lot of money to be there, but David Johnson has not finished the season healthy for multiple years. He is also a pretty decent pass catcher in his own right, but hasn't been efficient on the ground for quite a while. And while I do think that they are going to force feed the ball to David Johnson a lot, Duke Johnson carries tremendous upside if David Johnson is to get hurt, and you can get Duke Johnson much cheaper this year than you were last year, even though he's going to play a similar role. Last year, you had to pay a 5th or 6th round pick for him and didn't return that value, but even if Duke Johnson did exactly what he did, he's going at value in the 10th to the 11th round, and sometimes I've seen him go even as far as like the 12th or 13th round. But the upside of Duke Johnson taking over that role, if David Johnson is truly toast, I mean, he could be a top 10 running back. So I'm going to throw my hat back in the ring one last time. Call me a truther, but I like Duke Johnson again this year. A couple other guys, if you don't end up nabbing any of these guys, some people that came close but didn't quite make my list of my guys here. Some honorable mentions. Kenyon Drake in round 2 just doesn't have the track record for me to put complete confidence in him, but I do think that he has the ability to have a season similar to Miles Sanders just based on his workload, and I do have faith in the Cardinals offense. Aaron Jones in round 2, I mean, he's not getting the respect he deserves. The Packers did acquire A.J. Dillon, but I think Aaron Jones is still going to be the majority workload there and should be involved more in the passing game considering they didn't improve the passing weapons in Green Bay at all. James White in round 8 with Cam Newton coming into town, James White, and also with Sony Michel and Lamar Miller already on PUP. James White could be pretty heavily involved, especially in the passing game, and Cam Newton has shown with Christian McCaffrey that he knows how to get the ball to the running back. So I think James White could be a value in the 8th round. And then J.K. Dobbins, this is an interesting one. I just want to throw his name out there because there's still a decent bit of time before the season starts. If there's any rumor that J.K. Dobbins is going to get the lead workload, then he is an absolute steal where he's going right now. If he was in a similar situation as Clyde Edwards-Helaire where Mark Ingram had opted out, I'd be taking J.K. Dobbins in the 1st round. His talent is ridiculous. Arguably as good of a runner as Jonathan Taylor, not quite as big, but still had an incredible productive year last year and in his freshman year in Ohio State. Had more production in college than Eddie George and Ezekiel Elliott, both from Ohio State. So J.K. Dobbins could be a very dominant fantasy player as soon as this year, but right now he's dealing with Mark Ingram, and unlike Marlon Mack in Indianapolis, I do believe that Mark Ingram is still going to get the majority of work. So that's why I couldn't quite put my guy status on J.K. Dobbins just yet. But if something changes between now and the season, J.K. Dobbins would immediately be thrown into my guys. But for now, we'll keep him in the honorable mentions category. Anyway, that's it, guys. Thank you for watching. We will be hitting you up with the wide receiver videos tomorrow. So check that out as well, and hit that like and subscribe button for more videos like this one. You can also check out our website with our full list of rankings. Click that link in the description, and we'll see you guys in the next video.